So let's imagine you're soaring next to a dune and all of a sudden you encounter a steeper area. What does this actually mean, flying next to this steeper dune? What does that do to the shape of the lifting area? And more importantly, what do you have to do different in order to get the most out of these changed circumstances? Let's find out. Welcome to Flight Coach. My name is Bas van Duin and it is my mission to help you get the most out of your life and your flying career through having less stress and more skills. And today we'll continue our talk about skills. In the previous episode I discussed the ideal line to fly in soaring conditions. That episode is a precursor to this one. If you have not seen that one before, I highly recommend that you do that now first and then come back to this episode. I'll leave a link right here. So welcome to the second episode in my series intended to help you soar better. And in this second episode we're going to go into more detail on what to do when flying steeper dunes. How does that affect the shape of the lifting area and the decisions you have to make to get the most out of this soaring experience. And the best way to get all this knowledge rooted in your meat computer, in my experience, is asking you some questions so you can think along, form your own opinions. And I'll just take you along. Let's walk over to my computer. So here we are again. I hop behind the computer in the simulation that I showed you last time. As you can see, it's our little idyllic low poly dune setting. Wind conditions, as you can see by the windsock, are still the same as in the previous video I made. And these were the conditions that I left you hanging with at the last video. So what were to happen to the lifty area? That's the main topic of this video. What can you do with it if the dune were to be steeper? If it were to look something like this. Oh, sorry about that. Well, going back to the original position, we have seen that the lifty area looks a bit like this. Now, if the dune would be steeper, roughly speaking, the lifty area would look something along these lines. So it would be less wide and it would be taller, would be higher, would become more elongated. But what would this actually mean for you as a pilot? Let's say you're transitioning from a dune that has this shape and you're flying along this dune and you encounter a piece of terrain that looks like this. And this is something that happens all the time. Got some nice questions for you about that. Now it's quite easy to imagine that if the shape of the dune changes, so will the shape of the lifting area. But the interesting thing is that this has quite a few operational consequences for you as a pilot. And let's go through those. So what will it do for your maximum altitude? Will there be A, no change? B, you will be able to get higher? Or C, you won't be able to get as high? If the dune were to be steeper and you were to fly the proper line, because that's of course very important, you would be able to end up significantly higher. Take a look at this difference. Starting here, maybe roughly, and this is just an approximation, twice as high. And what will this changing of the dune shape do for your ideal line? I mean, laterally speaking. A, fly closer to the sea, or B, fly closer to the dune. Now this actually is a very interesting scenario because I've seen it happen countless times with inexperienced dune soaring pilots. We have the pilot flying in the lifting area. Let's take a top-down look at it. And when you encounter a steeper dune, becomes steeper, so lifting area is changing and all of a sudden you are not in the lifting area anymore. And that is just because you refused to adjust your course. This makes the answer also very obvious. You have to fly closer to the dune in this case in order to stay in the area of lift.
So I hope these questions are ramping up in difficulty, because the next point we'll be encountering has to do with safety as well. So what happens to the distance you have versus other pilots when flying together in this lifting area? Will that distance be A, still the same? B, the distance will actually be larger? Or C, that distance will be smaller?
So this is a very nice one, because I think flying together with others is one of the great ways of sharing the joy we have of flying, right? Well, in that case, you also gotta be prepared to give the other one some room in cases that's needed. That may be the case here, because take a look. This happens, but of course both of them want to be inside that same lifty area. What does that do to their separation? If they are both trying to fly the ideal line, they are going to crash into each other. So the correct answer is you have less space to pass each other. You may actually have to leave the lifting area to give the other one the right of way. In this case, blue pilot being the one with the dune on his right hand side means that the red pilot has to leave the lifting area for a little bit, going from here, going around the other pilot back into the lifting area. And that's no problem, because even if you were to pass each other and you were to descend a little bit while going out, you can fly back in here and regain altitude once you've passed the blue pilot. So you have less space to maneuver. So you've got to pay more attention to the maneuvers that you're making.
And the last question has to do with taking off. Or maybe I should say taking off again. You can imagine the scenario that you've been flying along that less steep dune and you encounter a portion of dune that can be kilometers long, of course, that is steeper. What happens if you land there? What does this do to you taking off again? Does it A, make launching extra hard? B, make launching easier? Or C, does not make any difference?
In the original situation, would not be much of a hassle. The wing is completely inside the lifting area. You just run, kite, or make your normal beginner launch with the back towards the dune, accelerate forwards toward the sea and turn into the lifting area. All kinds of techniques you can apply to get into the air. Won't go into too much detail here. But what's important is to note, if the condition changes, say the dune is steeper, is that the lifting area actually starts a lot higher. You can see it move from over here to over here. So it starts higher, it is closer to the dune, but your positioning has to be quite a bit different. So I think a takeoff position to get the wing properly airborne would look more like this, to get your wing properly in the lifty area. So it's more difficult for two reasons. The positioning you have to do is more difficult. It's narrower, the margin you have. Not all techniques may work. The beginner approach with standing with your wing facing the sea, your back to the dune, accelerating forward towards the sea and then turning into the lifting area, that may not work here because it's just too narrow. You may actually have to kite or run along the bottom, the foot of the dune, and have to run on a very uneven surface. So taking off in these conditions may be way more challenging. So they may actually be that more challenging that if you're not a very experienced soaring pilot, that you can take off at the other type of dune, but you cannot take off at this type. Beware of that. you may get yourself into situations in which you can fly, because flying around over here is no problem for you. But if you try to land at the beach in these conditions and then try to relaunch again, it is possible that your skills are not of such a level yet that you're able to do that, forcing you to walk back many miles. Yes, I've done that.
Now here you can see some shots that I made while flying at my favorite soaring location, right up the coast here in the Netherlands a few weeks ago. And you see some quite big and smaller holes in the dunes. That will also affect the way you have to fly. And that's something we're going to talk about in the next video. If you have any recommendations or requests that you would like to see me model, please don't hesitate to reach out. Just drop me a comment and I'll get back to that. Did this video bring you any new insights? Would love to hear from you down below in the comments. If you like this video, don't forget to press that button. Maybe consider subscribing if you haven't already, and don't forget to press the bell icon so you get notified when my next episode goes live.
See you next time! See you in the air!